It is time for another episode of the Cultural Hall, and you might be looking at the title of this and thinking, "Oh no, what is happening? What are we doing here? We're talking about Isaiah." Okay, come on. Now, before, now hang on. Don't turn it off. Don't turn it off. Don't even press pause. Don't speed it up so that you can just get through this. I want you to know that we're bringing back one of the greatest guests we've had with us before, Joseph Spencer. He's here with us. If you haven't listened to the episode we did with him, we did one back episode 531. You can be able to listen as we chat about Mormon Thought, an introduction, a previous book that he's written. But today we're talking about Isaiah. And Joe or Joseph, do you prefer Joseph or Joe? Can I go Joe?
We would go Joe.
I love Joe. Here is the thing, that you have a new book out. It's called A Word in Season, Isaiah's Reception in the Book of Mormon. And here's the thing, the byline, the second line of the book, I already don't know what you're talking about when we talk about Isaiah's reception in the Book of Mormon. Can we start maybe there?
Yeah, sure. So scholars, there's a field of scholarship that gets called reception history. And the idea is people are looking at, say, how a certain part of the Bible has been read over time. They call that reception.
Okay.
So to speak here of Isaiah's reception in the Book of Mormon is to say, how does the Book of Mormon read Isaiah compared to how other people have read Isaiah over the years?
Okay. Well, then let's go there. How does the Book of Mormon read Isaiah compared to how other folks have read Isaiah?
Yeah, so that's a major part of what I'm trying to sort out in this book. My previous work on Isaiah in the Book of Mormon, I have just been trying to think about the Book of Mormon itself, right? I'm not looking at how other people are reading it and so on. I'm just saying, what the heck is the Book of Mormon doing? What I'm doing in this book is more of that work, of course. But yeah, I'm trying to see how the Book of Mormon reads it if you set that side by side with how others have read it. So for example, when Abinadi is interpreting Isaiah 53 and 52, he's asked by Noah's priests to interpret a few verses from Isaiah 52, but he not only explains those, but he also comments on Isaiah 53. I asked the question, how does he sound? Does he sound unique in the tradition? Does he sound sort of like everyone else? And especially part of my question is, how would that have sounded to the first readers of the Book of Mormon? Would they have read Abinadi and thought, oh yeah, that's the kind of thing you would expect someone to say about Isaiah 53? Or would they go, what the heck is that kind of a reading, right? Yeah, and it depends on where you are in the Book of Mormon. Some of it sounds familiar, I think, to an 1830 reader, and some of it would sound very, very new, very different.
So the question that immediately comes to mind is, how do you know what people thought 200 years ago or, 2000 years ago? It's like, well, I bet if I was one of the priests, I would probably think, how are you able to study and even know if what you're, purporting is even nearly accurate?
Yeah, good. So, the question of how people within the Book of Mormon would understand Isaiah is often very difficult. With Noah's priests, we can, I think, reconstruct some things, and I do some work on that in this book. But a lot of what I'm doing is looking at how the whole history of Jews, Christians, whether Protestant or Catholic or other, how they've read Isaiah, and that we can track. The field of of reception history finds scholars working on just a whole host of sources to ask, well, what can we say about Jews in the 13th century and how they read Isaiah? So let's pick up things that are being said in various records and so on. Or how are the early Christian fathers reading Isaiah? Let's take their various sermons and so on. And oh, look at how they're interpreting this verse. Look at how they're interpreting that verse. And of course, we can do the same thing in the early 1800s. We can ask, so how are Baptist ministers talking about Isaiah when they give sermons that have been recorded? How, if we look at like evangelical magazines that are circulating at the time, when they talk about Isaiah, what do they say about these passages, or commentaries that are being published at the time, et cetera, et cetera. And we can start to get a sense, because of course we don't know what everyday people are saying if they don't write anything, but we can get a sense for how people are understanding Isaiah and what that would mean for the Book of Mormon.
So we just look for different passages of people of different faith, not understanding and really grasping things, because that's what Isaiah means to. No, I'm just teasing.
Right.
But I guess I would imagine that we don't have the market on struggling our way through Isaiah, or on,
Absolutely.
having difficulty of finding our way through it. Do we see that in all other faiths and all that? Or are there some folks that really feel like they've got it on lock and we sort of look to them and go, oh, the Catholics certainly understand Isaiah, or, the evangelicals have found a way to unlock the power of Isaiah?
Yeah, so one reason people study reception history is to see just how wide the range is of understandings, right? And so when someone's working in reception history, they don't tend to assume like there's the one meaning
Sure.
of Isaiah, but instead, so, okay, so Catholics at such and such time are reading it this way, but then 200 years later, Catholics are reading it in a very different way. Definitely there are groups of people over the history of Isaiah's reception who have said, "No, we know what this means. This is all perfectly clear to us." But the fact that lots of other groups have read it differently should make us pause. And one of the things I'm arguing in this book is that if we look over the whole of the Book of Mormon, different figures in the Book of Mormon read Isaiah very differently.
Hmm.
Even within Nephite history, there's a history of reception.
So so forgive my linear mind. Then I kind of get to the end and go, well, if everyone thinking that this could mean something else that's different throughout time, even in our faith tradition, like, is the point to try and glean a little bit from everyone and be like, oh, okay, I like the way that, this prophet maybe looked at Isaiah this way, and this prophet kind of looked at it this way. What sort of resonates with me? Or do I find truth in all of these things? Or is it just one of those things where you get to the end of it and you go, I don't have to make a conclusion because no one else did.
Right.
Here we go.
Yeah, I think there are several answers I'd want to give to that. So one is that um, I think it is important for us to recognize that there's something to learn from various ways of reading a text. And part of that plays out is that um, different audiences might need something different
Hmm.
from Isaiah at different times, right? In the same sense that like a missionary going out is they're gonna use this verse in this way to talk to this investigator, but that way to talk to that investigator, just because their backgrounds are so different. So I think one thing we see going on is simply Isaiah needs to mean different things at different times to different people. But also one thing that's very unique about the Book of Mormon in this regard is if we're looking at reception history writ broad, we're going to look at how, say, Anglicans have read Isaiah over time or something like
Hmm.
that. What we're asking is, okay, well, here's some Anglican minister, here's some Anglican scholar, here's some average everyday Anglicans and what they're saying about Isaiah, and we can track that. The Book of Mormon gives us prophetic voices, Nephi, Abinadi, but then at its climax, of course, it gives us Jesus himself reading Isaiah. So
Hmm.
one thing that Latter-day Saints have here in a kind of unique way is the idea that we have Christ himself guiding a way through reading of Isaiah. Of course, someone reading the Book of Mormon from outside the faith tradition might go, huh? How do I think about that, right? But
Sure.
for believing readers like us, it's we go, okay, well, here's how Nephi reads it, here's how Abinadi reads it. Maybe there are different things at different times for different needs, but also like really got to keep an eye on Jesus. What's he doing?
As you put your work in a scale with other reception history, do people sort of just discount it because they're like, yeah, the Book of Mormon, you just took and copied passages and put it in and sort of discount it? Or is this something that, that an Anglican, that a Catholic, that an evangelical in their reception history and studying those things would go, oh, this is a valuable resource to bring into their stuff?
Right. So, yeah, I think traditionally it's very clear. Most people outside the faith, when they've read the Book of Mormon and found Isaiah there, they just roll their eyes and say, the way that Fawn Brody put it many, many years ago is that whenever Joseph Smith's literary reservoir ran dry, he copied passages from the Book of Mormon, right?
Hmm.
And I think that many outsiders have felt that way. Part of what I'm trying to do with this book, it's published by the University of Illinois Press,
Hmm.
which is not a Latter-day Saint press, and it's aimed at a broad scholarly readership as well as an average Latter-day Saint readership. So part of what I hope I'm doing here is showing people outside the tradition that the Book of Mormon has interesting and sophisticated things to say about Isaiah, and whether they buy that the Book of Mormon is from God, still they might go, "Oh, there are interesting things happening with Isaiah in the Book of Mormon, and that deserves attention. It deserves a hearing about what Isaiah might mean for a certain people at a certain time, or what it might mean for, say, if they're reading the Book of Mormon in a naturalistic vein, It might allow them to say, oh, so how does how does someone like Joseph Smith make sense of Isaiah in the 1830s? So yeah, I think I'm hoping that's certainly the hope is that this book will help people from outside the faith tradition take really seriously what is doing in the Book of Mormon.
I want to take a quick break real quick, and I want to get into some of the greater appreciation, greater understanding, the things that you have learned kind of along the way as you've read this reception or studied this reception history about other faiths, how you have maybe come to understand Isaiah a little bit better. I'd like to know some of those things, maybe enlighten all of us as far as that goes. We'll come back. We'll do that in the second block of the Cultural Hall. Here in the second block of the Cultural Hall, remember you can always send us an email, contact@theculturalhall.com. If you want to send us an email that says, I love that Joe Spencer so much, we'd love to share that email with him. If you want to send us an email that says, I don't understand a single word he said, can you get him to come back and explain himself better, would you please? We'd love that email too, contact@theculturalhall.com. Always open. Just let us know that, or just you should know that most of the time we share those emails here on the show. So I would not send something that you don't want shared. And that's how we are able to help people be a little bit kinder in their emails. Contact@theculturalhall.com. So tell me, you're studying how Isaiah is received in all these different cultures and groups and all these things, and mentioning that within the Book of Mormon, we certainly have a way, and the different prophets have a different way of being able to read and receive this. What have you gained that before starting into this project that you were like, nah, I didn't know. I didn't recognize that. I didn't see that as far as Isaiah goes.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a ton I've learned about Isaiah in the Book of Mormon, right? Just that to start.
Sure.
And of course, that's, I mean, all through the book. But yeah, I learned a ton about the larger world and how people have read Isaiah before I began work on this project. And this was 9 years in the making. So
Jeez.
before working on this book, I had not read much. I mean, I had dabbled here or there or whatever, but this was a much more systematic study. And it turns out there's a lot of interesting stuff that's gone on with people reading Isaiah. For example, Christians have very traditionally and very often found many prophecies of Christ, and that's Latter-day Saint. Jews, unsurprisingly, have not found prophecies of Jesus Christ in Isaiah, and so how do they make sense of a passage that, for example, Latter-day Saints read Isaiah 53 and say that's predicting Jesus and his suffering and so on? So how have Jews made sense of that? And that turns out to be very, very interesting, and a good sense for that actually I think helps us read parts of the Book of Mormon better. Um, it's interesting to see where certain passages have become part of, say, the liturgy in the Mass. Isaiah 49, for instance, is has very traditionally been read as part of the Mass for Christmas, which I don't think strikes a Latter-day Saint, because we're used to Isaiah 49 showing up at the end of First Nephi and being about gathering of Israel stuff and so on. But there's all this little language in there that Catholics very early on found applicable to Christmas. And so for them, Isaiah 49 is a Christmas chapter, right? And just even realizing that, you go, oh, that's an interesting way to read that. I would have never seen that. Of course, you've got texts that have been read in ways that would sound very, very familiar to us, but you've got others that have been read in what seem to us very wild ways. Isaiah 18, which does not show up in the Book of Mormon, but in the 18th and early 19th century, you have American Christians who are reading those as prophecies very specifically about America. And they're trying to argue that Isaiah here has foreseen the rise of America in certain ways. The Book of Mormon isn't interested in that passage, despite its being interested in the rise of America. So I've learned a ton. There's just a lot of interesting stuff going on all over the place in the history of Isaiah's reception.
I know enough about academics to know that they can take anything and be like, man, we are jazzed about this. And I love it. I love it for that.
Yeah.
But I know that sort of as a both joking, and I know that the sentiment is the same, that when you go, yeah, I spent 9 years and we're studying Isaiah, and I would imagine when you tell that to a general, average, let's just even say Christian person, doesn't have to be a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, they kind of either go, I don't understand it, or they roll their eyes and go, man, I hope that you know, took your caffeine pills while you were studying that so that you could, stay awake. Um, does that stigma seem to be changing? Are you hoping to be part of the change? Have I completely pegged that wrong about folks with Isaiah?
No, I think it's really quite fair, especially when we're reading in the King James version
Hmm.
of the Bible. Isaiah can just be baffling, just baffling.
Sure.
Um, the language of the King James is already 400 years old, and on top of that, Isaiah can seem kind of complicated and so on if we don't have a lot of historical context, if we don't know a lot about ancient Israelite prophecy or poetic style, and so on. Yeah, it's rough sledding. It's really rough sledding. Um, but that said, the entry fee for making sense of Isaiah is actually not that high. Get a good modern translation, and that kind of brings the language down to earth a bit. Learn a little bit about history between the 8th and 6th centuries BC, and a whole lot of things come clear. We have a tendency to be looking for one thing when we read Isaiah. We're just looking for Christ,
Hmm.
which is good to be looking for Christ. But a lot of what's happening in Isaiah is talking about other kinds of things. It's talking about the scattering and gathering of Israel in very specific ways. And if we're only looking for things that remind us of Jesus, then it's confusing. But if we start to take a sort of open mind, what's this about? Things get a little easier. And also part of it is just time. Spend time with Isaiah, and it slowly gets more familiar. You get a foothold here and a handhold there, and then other things start to make sense. And um, so it wasn't that it took me 9 years to figure out what on earth Isaiah is saying at all,
Oh,
right? Um, but yeah, I think that entry fee is not that high. You don't need to learn Hebrew. You don't have to memorize a ton of really obscure facts. You don't have to somehow penetrate the mystery. Um, I think it's actually not all that hard to get a good sort of point of entry.
so with the church sort of, I don't know if allowing, but maybe easing on its translation, right? Like, hey, you know what? I've been in Sunday schools where we've done new inspired version from the Bible, and I can't remember the other one, but the other one that is very easy to understand. And so you start to have people being able to study the Bible that way, a little easier to understand. Are we just setting ourselves up for forever not understanding it because there won't be a new inspired translated version of the Book of Mormon? I would imagine we would never, I don't know, maybe not never, but we'll always sort of keep it in the form that it is now. And so it's harder for us. It's easy over here. Can we take it over here and put it over there? Will people even make the transition from a new inspired to try and correlate it with the Book of Mormon?
Right.
Like, are we just putting ourselves in that predicament of, I don't know, will we ever understand the beauty that is the Book of Isaiah?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the Isaiah stuff we can, of course, read in other Bibles, other translations of the Bible, and make sense of it, and then bring that back to the Book of Mormon. Um, and I think that's really worth doing. Whether we'll ever do something like that right within the Book of Mormon, yeah, I mean, one, that's way above my pay grade. That is not a
I
decision
need
I
an answer
even
right now, Joe. Come on, tell me right now. Are we ever going to do that?
right here.
They told me that you had the answer. They said I wrote a letter to downtown, and they said, "Ask Joe; he'll tell you."
Yeah, I wish I had some say in some of these things, right? No,
Right.
I think though there's reason to think we may make some study tools or whatever it may be that might make some of that easier. Much of the Book of Mormon, I think, feels pretty accessible to
Hmm.
Latter-day Saints, if only because of familiar it so consistently. Um, but there are tools that are coming out all the time. Just released is Grant Hardy's Annotated Book of Mormon, published by Oxford University Press, which uh, one of the most useful things in that little resource, I think, this massive
Yeah. This.
100-page block.
Yeah.
But one of the most useful things in that is that it has consistently has footnotes that cite historical dictionaries,
Mm,
so that you'll read a word and look and it'll be like, so in 1828 this meant, um, and
interesting.
that's really handy and can kind of help people, I think, recognize where language has changed over 200 years. Um, and we may at some point do something like that. I don't know, as a kind of official thing in the church. It's worth noting that in Community of Christ, what used to be called the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints,
Hmm.
since the 60s, they've had an updated language version of the Book of Mormon. Um,
Interesting.
yeah, 1966, I think it was, they published it. It's called the Revised Authorized Version of the Book of Mormon. Uh, and uh, and I think our tradition, for various reasons, has been nervous about that kind of a move. But I wonder if at some point, if only just to make sure that the Book of Mormon is as accessible as possible in missionary work and for younger readers, it wouldn't surprise me if we made that kind of a move. Let's get the F's and the dots and the so on and update that. We'll see.
Hmm. In some of the stuff that you sent over to me prior to our chatting, one of the things that you brought up, and I want to just sort of bring front and center, is the Isaiah problem. Have
Yeah.
we addressed what the Isaiah problem is, and if not, what is it, and how does your book deal with the Isaiah problem?
Sure, yeah. This is what Sidney B. Sperry, 80 years ago, called it, right? The Isaiah problem in the Book of Mormon. The idea is just this. There's a massive consensus in biblical scholarship that parts of Isaiah were written much, much later than the prophet Isaiah.
Hmm.
So many, many biblical scholars think that whole swaths of the book of Isaiah date much later than Isaiah himself. There's a lot of debate about exactly when certain parts took shape, and then what the process of editing it into a final book looked like, and so on. But this is a massive field of study, and there's a great deal of consensus in biblical scholarship that there's this complex story of authorship. That raises questions for Latter-day Saints, because if the basic picture biblical scholars are working with is true, Nephi shouldn't have some of the chapters he quotes on the brass plates. They should have been written later than he left Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm.
And Sidney Sperry already, like I say, like 80 years ago, raised this question and said, what do we do with this? This is the Isaiah problem. And it's worth noting that lots of people have written about that issue. Lots and lots of people have written about that issue over the years. There's a really excellent essay published just last year, maybe, by Josh Sears at BYU, where he just summarizes all the different ways Latter-day Saints have made sense of that question, just one by one. This position, this position, and so on. Part of what I do in this book is say, I think the question doesn't matter. So
Oh,
that's
interesting.
kind of a wild take. But part of what I do in the book is I want to ask how the Book of Mormon would be read by its very first readers. And so I actually come up with a kind of, I don't know if it's crazy, but maybe I'll say crazy, a crazy little imaginary situation. I imagine somebody who knows the history of how Isaiah has been read, but who is not one of Joseph Smith's followers, but is sympathetic. And this person gets a chance to sit in the room with Joseph and Oliver while Joseph dictates the text of the Book of Mormon. So all through the book, I'm trying to read through that person's eyes. And of course, that person didn't exist, but
Sure.
I'm trying to read through that person's eyes. But in 1829, Oliver and other scribes, America is talking about multiple authorship of Isaiah. That's just not even a picture in their heads, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's some people back in Europe that are talking about it at that point, but not in America. And so, in some sense, I can just for most of this book, I can ignore the question entirely. Just it's not what this person would be worried about. But then, by reading the Book of Mormon really carefully, what it is doing with Isaiah, what it is saying about Isaiah, I think we have good reason to think that the Book of Mormon itself says if you start getting trapped in those questions of does Isaiah mean that the Book of Mormon isn't historical and so on, then you're actually missing the very point what the Book of Mormon is doing with Isaiah. So I deal with the Isaiah problem briefly, but I don't try to solve it. I basically say that's the last question we need to ask. We've got a whole lot of other questions we've got to ask first. If we try to decide what about this Isaiah problem, is the Book of Mormon false or true first, we'll never actually read the Book of Mormon and find out what it's doing with Isaiah.
When you do this book, it's called A Word in Season, by the way. I don't think we've even mentioned that up to this point. University of Illinois Illinois Press, and a shout out, of course, to my friend Heather, who works over there for University of Illinois Press, who helps us get a lot of the authors. They do a great deal of Mormon scholarship through University of Illinois Press. Just a great job, and always is able to connect us with the various authors doing just tremendous works. You, of course, being one of them. when you go to do something like this, is there a like when you have a dissertation and there's a point, like that you do the whole thing and it's like, and the final chapter is whammo. Do you have a whammo point, or is it just, isn't it interesting? And we just sort of meander our way through all of the interesting things.
I do have what I hope is a whammo. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, so there's a kind of general point I'm hoping to make clear across the whole book, and that is just that the Book of Mormon is really, really interesting when it comes to Isaiah, and that's something I think average Latter-day Saints need to hear because they're pretty sure Isaiah is not interesting,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's something that I think people outside the church need to hear too, because they tend to think, oh, this is probably just Joseph Smith copying down chapters of Isaiah when he doesn't know what else to do. So one major point I'm doing all the way through is trying to say this is essential to the meaning of the Book of Mormon, the structure of the Book of Mormon, and it's really, really interesting. But if I have a whammo point as I get to the end of the book, what everything is leading up to, it's related to what we were just talking about. It's that I think the Book of Mormon, as it works through these passages of Isaiah, is essentially in the end trying to show that we are supposed to relate to the Book of Mormon, like the Book of Mormon is itself asking us to relate to it as an object of faith rather than an object of scientific investigation.
Hmm.
And hence it's asking us through its readings of Isaiah, very specifically through its readings of Isaiah, it's asking us to read the book without asking about evidence or proofs, but instead to set all of those things aside and ask what this prophetic message is, and then we can talk about these more sort of intellectual questions, if you will, or evidential questions, or something like that. So yeah, it's not just that I say that's what I think, so
Mhm.
here let's read Isaiah. It's that I
Mhm.
think the reading of Isaiah in the book itself is trying to argue that.
So hearing that, I have a question that I'm going to delicately tiptoe around because I know where you work and all of these things,
Sure.
but it is worth sort of asking. Uh, you know, um, the more people I talk to when we talk about like the Bible, they think, hey, you know what? Probably not. That probably didn't exactly happen, right? Maybe it's just a book and a collection of stories that teach very valuable lessons, very, you know, um, thought out principles, things that have been handed down years over years, and maybe that applies to the New Testament. I think people probably more apply that to the Old Testament when they talk about that. If people are to look at the Book of Mormon, and I think at one point the attitude within the church was like, this is a historical, bump 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 bump, and then different things have come about where people are like, there's no way that this could be, and they didn't have this at this time, and try and destroy that sort of historical context of it. I, Let me think of how I want to phrase this question. Um, could the Book of Mormon be very valuable as it is now, even if it wasn't a like a historical telling of a group of people, that it's a collection of religious stories to teach for our day, if that
Right.
question makes sense?
Totally. Totally. Yeah, the question definitely makes sense. So I should be clear right up front. I 100% believe in the historicity of the Book of Mormon. So I'm talking about the question sort of at a theoretical vein, right, rather
Okay.
than like my own practical faith vein. But so do I think that someone can find real spiritual value in the Book of Mormon without believing that it's concrete ancient history? And I think the answer has to be yes.
Yeah.
Not only because I think theoretically that makes some sense, but also because I know people that it works that way for, right?
Hmm.
Um, so I think it can be received that way. Um, if But I think also one has to be careful about that position. It can be a complicated position to hold
Sure.
uh, in a community that places so much emphasis on the historicity of the Book of Mormon and so on. That can become a kind of culturally weird position to occupy, and then it creates frictions and so on and so forth. Um, and the people I've seen who hold that position uh, well, so to speak, tend to be people who just say, like, I just don't talk much about. I don't go around saying, well, the Book of Mormon is just fiction, but it's inspired fiction. If you're
Hmm.
saying that too loudly, then it's hard for people around you to buy that you're not really just attacking the book, right? But
Interesting.
if someone just says like, no, what matters to me is this message,
You're right.
then I think that plays differently. But absolutely, I think that's an open position people can hold. Um, for my own part, I believe in the historicity of the Book of Mormon, and not on rational scholarly grounds, just on as a position of faith. Right? I'm not an ancient historian. I can't prove that this thing fits anywhere in particular in the ancient world, though I've read a lot of stuff and some of it's really amazing.
Hmm.
Uh, but for me, it's a position of faith, and it's a position that, uh, in some sense, I almost have to set aside, even though that's where I stand. I have to set it aside so that I can read the book without getting like letting this little anachronism or that little concern like derail my reading of the book in earnest.
Hmm. Yeah, I appreciate that answer because, having had the opportunity in the somewhat recent past to meet someone who's like, yeah, no, it is, as you said, inspired fiction is what this person essentially believed. And I went, well, wait a minute.
Right?
Hang on. Let me wrap my head around this real quick. And then, to be able to visit with them and they're like, oh no, but I'm 100% in. I'm doing all the things. But what it allowed for this particular individual when we were speaking about it is it allowed them to not have to worry about and we always talk about, or were there horses? What about gold? Did they have this, right? They didn't have to worry about any of that stuff and then could instead focus on, how did this person navigate their relationship with Christ and the coming of Christ and then, being able to with other people and all these things. And it's funny as like a young, deacon within the church, the perspective of a young person that I had to where I am now, I just love being able to see it from all of these different things. And that's what I think is so fascinating about this idea of reception history is it's like, how do these people this and how do those people that? And that's why I love it. It buoys up my faith to go, oh, cool. How did you do that? Oh, you got there that way? I'm not sure that I agree with that, but I can take a little bit of what you said, and that can, shore up maybe a part that was a little weaker for me, or I had never even thought about that at all. I have no idea how I feel about that. Let me sit and stew on that for a little while to
Um,
further understand that.
yeah, beautiful. The one of my favorite lines from J. Golden Kimball, and who knows if he really said it because a lot of things get attributed to him, right?
Sure.
But he reportedly once said, "I can't wait to die and find out if all this stuff we've been teaching is true."
Yeah.
and, and sometimes I think that may be the right attitude that we like. I fully believe in the historicity of the Mormon, and but really, what matters here turns out in the end, oh no, but no, I'm really glad I got the message. Right?
Yeah.
I'm really, really glad. Like, wring my hands constantly over whether I could prove the Book of Mormon fits in the ancient world, and much rather gave my time to figuring out what God is saying to the world through this book.
Yeah. Let's take another break. When we come back in the third block, there's a couple questions we ask everyone who steps into the cultural hall. Ask those of you as we asked you those before. Plus, we got some final questions about this book, A Word in Season. We'll talk about that and get to those questions coming up in the third block of the cultural hall. Here in the third block of the Cultural Hall, remember that you can become a Patreon saint of the Cultural Hall. You go to patreon.com/the Cultural Hall. We always like to say, put your money where your ears are. It helps support the great work that we do here. And I would also encourage you, obviously, to get A Word in Season. You can find the link to it in the show notes. The book by Joe Spencer. I like calling you Joe. I know it's Joseph, birth given, but calling you Joe makes me feel like we're best friends. Go
Yeah.
to patreon.com/the cultural hall, or you can just go to the show notes for the link for the book. So as we sort of look towards the end of our chat today, I guess I would wonder, people pick up the book, they go out there like, I'm fascinated enough to give Joe a chance. Like how is it, are we going chapter by chapter? Is it faith by faith? What is the structure of this book like? And can people do it in sort of that, I'm going to take a little, digest it, or do we have to read the whole thing to go and understand what your point is?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, so because I mentioned earlier that I try to read through the eyes, the ears of this person who's sitting in the room while Joseph dictates the text of the Book of Mormon. As a result, I read the Isaiah chapters here in a different order than they appear in the Book of Mormon,
Hmm.
because if you're familiar with this, Joseph, he dictates the lost manuscript, right? And then Martin loses that. And then he continues dictating from Mosiah to Moroni. And only after that does he dictate First Nephi through Omni. And so as a result, I actually start here with Mosiah. The book opens with Mosiah. So the book, as I've done it, a word in season is divided into two halves. The first half where we're analyzing Mormon's project with Isaiah. What does Mormon do in Mosiah and Third Nephi especially? And then the second half of the book is Nephi's project
Hmm.
with Isaiah. And doing it that way, I mean, one, we're hearing how it's coming to Joseph as he dictates it, and also how someone would hear it. But it also allows us, Mormon's project is kind of interesting. It opens with this first story about Abinadi and Isaiah, and then there's like silence for hundreds of pages about Isaiah. And then in Third Nephi, Christ shows up and wants to talk about Isaiah. And those are kind of the bookends of Mormon's project as we have it. So it allows me to sort of say Mormon's clearly interested in what's happening with Isaiah, but he sort of starts with Isaiah, then leaves it out, and then ends with Isaiah. So what's going on there? And then the second half, when you get to Nephi's project, Nephi is systematic about Isaiah, right? There are careful structures of his books, and Isaiah is playing very specific roles, and lots of Isaiah chapters being quoted. And that allows me to use Mormon's project to sort of set up where things are still a little gentle and a little simpler to set up a lot of the questions. And then the second half, now let's go nuts, right? Let's really dig in. So it's the kind of book that I hope it sort of builds nice and slow that way so that someone doesn't feel like we often do coming into First Nephi, Second Nephi, just like overwhelmed. We can kind of,
Boom.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. We can start a little slow, get our heads around the project and so on, and then we're ready for Nephi.
And is it geared towards the member of the church trying to understand more about Isaiah and this whole thing, or do you feel like it's geared towards your fellow academics to kind of get in and get after?
I tried very hard. I tried very hard to make it reach both audiences. So we'll see how I've succeeded. I am definitely trying to speak to a larger academic audience in the book, as well as average Latter-day Saints. It is a scholarly book. It's not written in an everyday kind of Sunday schoolish kind of way. But I really worked hard to make it accessible. I've written on Isaiah in the Book of Mormon for a very everyday audience before, and this is not quite that. But I do think anyone with some familiarity with scholarly things, even gentle familiarity, should be able to make their way through the book.
What's your deal with Isaiah? Why do you care so much about Isaiah in particular?
That's a good question. It I mean, this is a good Latter-day Saint listening audience, so I think that this is not out of school to share. My patriarchal blessing um, told me from very early on in my life that I needed to study the Abrahamic covenant in particular in
Hmm.
Scripture, and that would be a major part of my life. And so, from very early on, I began reading in Scripture, watching for gathering, scattering of Israel. And you can't get far in the Book of Mormon without realizing that is all tied up with Isaiah.
Hmm.
So from my early 20s, I was trying to figure out Isaiah so that I could understand something that I felt God had pointed me directly to.
Wow. I appreciate you sharing that. I know that that's something very personal, but it's super cool to know that that has become like your life scholarship because it's very, very literally, if you believe in patriarchal blessings the way that we do, God given to you. Like, hey, I know you're thinking about some things in life. Here you go.
Here you go.
Okay, I'm on board.
Yeah.
Have you felt like in that sort of journey that because of that calling that God has given you through your patriarchal blessing, that you've had like um I don't want to say extra help, but maybe like confirmed help from God as you've found your way through this or looked at different things to study within Isaiah or the Abrahamic covenant?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, I mean, part of what it is to be a scholar, even a Latter-day Saint scholar, and working as a scholar of faith, even then, you always hold all of your positions, and this is treasures in earthen vessels kind of thing, right?
Hmm.
And so I always want to be really careful, like this is provisional, this is what I've found, this is what the evidence I've gathered suggests to me, and so on. But of course, for me, all of it is consecrated work, and all of it is work I'm hoping to do in the service of the kingdom as much as I'm trying to do it in the service of the academy. And so I sure hope that God has helped me in various ways and so on. But I always want to be careful never to let that sound like or mean that, well, this was revealed to me, so people
Sure.
have to do this, right? But yeah, I have certainly found a great deal of spiritual fulfillment working on this stuff.
Well, and in some ways, maybe that's the thing, right? Where you're like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. Not one more minute. I don't understand. I've hit a road, I'm at the whatever. But then having that, that faith and belief that it's like, no, God wants me to do that. Like that to me seems like it'd be like, nope, okay, get up. Today was tough. Tomorrow will be better. I'll be able to do it. That in some way seems pretty significant in a way that, lines in a patriarchal blessing about something like this could help. That's tremendous. I think that's awesome. Um, so let me ask you this. We ask everyone 3 questions who step into the cultural hall. I asked these of you when we visited before, but your answers may have changed.
Yeah, we'll see.
Probably because I don't know that you even remember them, but we'll ask. The first one is, do you have a calling right now? And if so, what is it?
I do. I am currently a bishop.
Okay. How do you like
Yeah.
that? How do you like that?
I'm a bishop in the most amazing ward I've ever been in the church, so it's a great place to be a bishop. It's been grounding is maybe a good way to put it, and especially when you're working as an academic and you can be very ivory tower and very heady stuff, and it's really really good to come home from work and go sit in an office and talk with people about really concrete, real problems, both spiritual and temporal, and um, it's been really good for me as well as I hope I'm doing some good for my ward.
How long have you been a bishop?
A little over 2 years.
Okay. So you're starting to get your feet under you and go,
Yeah.
I know how this goes.
Yep. Yep.
Does it get, I've always wondered this because I know a lot of, BYU professors also find themselves in church leadership. I'm one of those guys that reads the church news and looks at the stake presidencies and goes through the line and goes, that person works at BYU, et cetera, et cetera. I would wonder because so much of your professional life is with the church, and then because the demands of both a stake president or a bishop in your case, so much of your then personal life becomes a demand of the church. Do you ever just be like, man, you know what? I want to go play pickleball for just 2 minutes right now, non-church pickleball. Is it overwhelming or is it just, man, I love it and happy to serve?
I mean, mostly it's, man, I love it and I'm happy to serve. I will say though that like working at BYU is, I mean, it's a job, and so it's the church, but like there's a lot. I'm doing paperwork. I'm right. I'm prepping a lecture, and I'm trying to think about the arc of a lesson or something like that, or whatever. I'm working on this scholarship project, and it's just straight philosophy, has nothing to do with religion or whatever. So it's not like my job is 40 hours a week of intensely spiritual work, though
Sure.
I hope it's all consecrated, right? But it's uh so that I don't feel like I'm always like all I do is church stuff, right? Yeah.
I also wonder too, because of the kind of things that you study and being able to visit with your congregants about different things. Do you ever start into something and then you go, let me try this again in a different in a different sort of approach. I realize I'm not at BYU right now. Swipe that. How are you?
Yeah. Um, I think I figured that a lot of that out before I got called as a bishop, luckily, right? I was teaching Sunday school for a while and I had to figure out what does a Sunday school teaching situation look like versus my teaching on campus, and very different styles. So I think I'm pretty good at leaving campus on campus.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. All right. Second question is if you could pick a calling for yourself, either one that exists or make one up, what would you pick?
I wonder what I said last time. I mean, I enjoy being a gospel doctrine teacher. It's so many people hate that calling, and I love it. So if I can ease people's burden by taking that calling on, I do enjoy that. But boy, making up a calling though, I don't know. Probably gospel doctrine teacher. That's
And
uh
what is it about gospel doctrine that you love teaching so much? What?
I mean, one, as I just mentioned, it's a very different kind of teaching context than I'm used to on campus. On campus, like, this is my classroom. Here's what we're going to learn. Like, there are right or wrong answers so far as this class is concerned. You sit there, I'm a lecture to you, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Um, but in Sunday school, it doesn't feel to me like that's the task. In Sunday school, the task is to create a real devotional conversation about scripture. And that's a lot of fun. So my teaching style in a ward setting is to spend 5 to 10 minutes setting up some information so that people have a better grasp on what's going on in a text or whatever, but then use that to narrow in on just a verse or two, and then just say, what do you think that means?
Mm.
How do you make sense of that? What does that mean about the life of faith? And then just generate discussion, just probe and push and get people talking. So it's less heady,
Hmm.
but it's way more devotionally grounded, and it creates a real sense of community and spiritual community in a ward that is just a remarkable thing to be a part of.
I listened to a podcast recently talking about Sunday school and how so many people think that that's the time to like teach doctrinal these things, from being up there. But the way that this particular show talked about it, it posited that like this is a time to create community,
Yeah.
and whatever you have to do to get people to share their authentic selves with other people that can sort of witness their authentic selves and be present with one another, whether or not you talk about that there were six at the church when the church was restored, and who signed first and then they were baptized, this like that's important, but the stress that they made was that this is a time to create community that you don't have in any other form, function, or feature within the church. And that made me go, maybe I've been doing this all.
I think that's really, really true. I think that's what it is. And creating a community around the word, right?
Mhm.
That's it's a really beautiful thing. Um, to get people responding to phrases of scripture together, and be, as you say, being their authentic selves, being very open, but in response to the divine word. Man, I don't think there's a better sense of community you can get in a word.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Last question we ask everyone. And we ask that you interpret it however you would like. But the question remains, what is your favorite part of your faith?
Oh, my favorite part of my faith. I mean, scripture is what gets me up in the morning, and there's a reason that that's what I've chosen to do for a living. Um, uh, but also, I mean, I'll add to that. Um, there is something remarkable about the willingness of the saints to to come together really earnestly, and that never ceases to amaze me. That when you yeah, when the task is to read a text carefully and read it together in real ways, man, these people show up, right? And when it's time to do something serious for the community, let's go to what a soup kitchen, whatever it is, man, people show up and they are there and they're willing to do it together. And that kind of thing is so, so rare in today's world, that people can form real community in a spiritual sense, and that the saints are capable of doing that. And man, that just it gives me faith in humanity in addition to faith in God.
Question about your scripture study, because you like, as we've mentioned several times, and I just like calling you an academic. I love that label. My friend Joe Spencer, the academic. Do you find that you engage in the scriptures differently when you're just like, this is my daily reading and I'm looking for spiritual enlightenment, than when you're like, and what did Isaiah say? And how would this be? And how do you distinguish that? And is it important to do it in a couple of different ways? Or could we just engage the scriptures in one way for all purposes?
Yeah, it's a great question. This has changed a great deal over my life. I mean, for the first, I don't know, however many years after I got home from the mission, scripture study looked like one thing, right? There was just kind of one thing I was doing. But increasingly, through grad school and into my job, it became clear that this was going to be my daily bread too, right? Like, this was how I was going to make a living. And as that dawned, there was a moment where I realized I was not going to be able to, like it would feel like I would never get a break from
Yeah.
my work,
Yeah.
right? I realized at some point that it felt like my entire connection with God was academic. And so, yeah, there was a moment where I very deliberately had to go, okay, I need to carve out a part of my study of the scriptures that is explicitly devotional, exclusively devotional. I'm not trying to figure anything out. I have to have a part of it that is more like meditative prayer and reading. And if I'm reading this verse, I'm asking, how am I doing before God? Right? Not
Mhm.
what is Paul saying here, right? Uh, and um, and yeah, I had to carve that space out, and then I had to at some point say I'm not allowed, even in the other part of my scripture study, because there's a part that's devotional, a part that's more
Mm.
figuring stuff out, but I'm not allowed in that other part to be working on any part of scripture that I'm writing academically about, right?
Mm.
It just has to be something I'm figuring out. The book of Jonah for the sake of figuring out the book of Jonah, but not because I'm going to write a paper on it or I'm going to teach a lecture on it next week or whatever. And yeah, I very deliberately had to carve that space out. So there's a part of my scriptural life that is 100% devotional.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. And the name of the book, A Word in Season, Isaiah's Reception in the Book of Mormon. Find a link for it in the show notes. Guest, the academic himself, Joe Spencer. It's Joseph Spencer. He'll be back again, I'm sure, because you're always working on something. Is there something that you have in the works? You mentioned this was 9 years in the works, this particular project, something that you've been either stewing about or have already started into that we can look forward to in the future?
Yeah, there's something I'm well into the writing of, a little book on Hugh Nibley's thought, also for the University of Illinois.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
The stuff that the University of Illinois do, they have the smaller kind of books that they have about different individuals. Is
Yep.
that what your Hugh Nibley book is?
Yep. That series. Yep.
Yeah, man, that's exciting. When is that? Any idea on hit date?
I'm hoping to wrap it up by the end of this next summer,
Okay,
and then the review process and
sure.
publications. So I don't know. It may be a couple of years before it's out, but I'm hoping to wrap it up in the next 6, 8 months.
And the series with that book, we've talked with several of the different authors of the ones that have already been published. Is it just sort of like thought leaders within the church, or how do they couch who those people are and how they're selected?
Well, it's funny you should ask. I'm one of the editors of the series. So,
Well, interesting. Tell me then, please, Joe Spencer.
yeah, so Matt Bowman and I edit the series together, and yeah, the series is titled "Introductions to Mormon Thought." And we the idea of the series is to, yeah, each volume is on some individual, um, and each volume has the same structure. There's a chapter of biography, 3 chapters where you analyze the person's thought, contribution, or whatever, and then a bibliographical essay. And the aim is to look at figures from a wide range of aspects of Latter-day Saint and larger Restoration history, and just look at the intellectual contributions these figures make. So whether those are like sort of mainstreamy figures, Bruce R. McConkie or James Talmage, or whether these are people sort of on the margins of the tradition, Sonia Johnson, there's a volume coming out on soon, or George P. Lee, we have someone writing about, or whether these are people in other branches of the Restoration. There's a volume coming out soon on Joseph Musser, who's the chief architect of fundamentalist, right, polygamous theology. So yeah, so the series is pretty far flung. Just trying to think about the Latter-day Saint intellectual tradition.
That's awesome. Looking forward to being able to speak with you about that then, and certainly with the other authors of those books. And I know I think we've missed one or two along the way, so I got to recommit my efforts to get those
Yeah.
authors to find out about those Mormon Thought leaders, Mormon Thought folks. Joseph, hope that this episode has nourished and strengthened your body, that if you're not healthy enough to listen this week, that you'll be healthy enough to listen next week, and that when the time comes, you will be able to travel home in safety. In the meantime, we'll be saving a seat for you on the back row of the Cultural Hall.